Today's episode of The Watch is brought to you by Sword of Trust. Sword of Trust stars Mark Maron as a cynical pawn shop owner in possession of a sword that, according to a network of deranged conspiracy theorists, proves the South really won the Civil War. Maron gives his best performance to date as he and his ragtag cohorts try to take this seedy subculture for all it's worth. Sword of Trust is now in theaters and on demand, with Mark and director Lynn Shelton appearing at select screenings. Visit swordoftrust.com for details. Hey everyone, thanks for listening to today's episode of The Watch. Fun show today. Greenwald calls in from New Mexico to talk about rookie showrunner mistakes, and we also chatted a little bit about some Hollywood news. We addressed the Jeremy Renner Jeep commercial, so everybody take a deep breath. We also talked about this fascinating news story that Greta Gerwig and Noah Baumbach will be working with Margot Robbie on a Barbie movie for Warner Brothers, so that's fun. Some other stuff with Andy. Then Amanda joined me, Amanda Dobbins, co-host of Big Little Live, and The Ringer's Amanda Dobbins. You can also hear her on Jam Session, several other podcasts, The Big Picture. We talked about Big Little Lies Season 2, but specifically about the Andrea Arnold story that came out at the end of last week, about her sort of essentially being replaced while season 2 was being filmed. From IndieWire about that. It was a really interesting conversation. Amanda and I talked a little bit about Big Little Lies, and then I was joined by Allison Herman to talk about Euphoria. So fun show today. Check it out.
I need support staff to clear the room. Stand up and walk. Now.
Hello and welcome to The Watch. My name is Chris Ryan. I'm editor at TheRinger.com, and calling me from his trailer, ooh la la, it's Andy Greenwald!
What do you want from me? What do you want from me? I've gone Hollywood, except I'm in an Embassy Suites parking lot in northeast Albuquerque, and I'm spending the day from 6 a.m. until probably 8 p.m. In a cemetery, and it is 99 degrees out.
And you're also shooting a television show.
Allow me this moment. Exactly. Allow me this moment of respite. By the way, speaking of oblique criticisms of me going Hollywood, Chris, I was, first of all, great to talk to you.
Yeah,
Hi,
nice to talk to you too.
I was trading emails with the Watch superfan, Alexa Fogel, who was a guest on our show, and the brilliant casting director behind such shows as The Deuce and The Wire and Atlanta, Pose. And she was very sweet, very kind. She was giving me advice about the show. And I said, it's hard work, but it's good. And she said, really, the only thing that matters is if you have a good showrunner. And I feel like there are a lot of ways to take that.
Do you think that was that Motivation Monday? Was she like, you just have to be the Jedi that we all know you are, or it was like you come from nothing?
There's three versions of it. All of which are related to Rey's parentage in the Star Wars films, right? Because her parentage has changed movie to movie.
Yeah, of course.
So there's the one where it's like, Monday motivation, you are the Skywalker that we were promised, and you can skywalk the show. 2 is, you're trash. You come from a junk planet, and you can never do this. And 3 is, maybe she just didn't know that that's the role I'm filling here, and then I shouldn't disabuse her of that notion, because then the true comment will come behind it, like, oh boy, like, you rookie numbskull, maybe don't write 8 pages in a funeral, of a funeral instead of a cemetery when it's going to be 99 degrees.
Good idea, Greenwald.
Thanks, buddy.
So, that's an interesting idea, because I know that part of what you've been talking to me about is, as you've been making the show, and we're talking about Briar Patch, obviously, is that the stuff that just seems like a great idea on the page. You're just like, God, I wish somebody had rewritten me. When you actually you have to get to the production.
Wait till we get to 5 and 6. A lot of night work, Pally. A lot of night work for your boy.
And for people who don't know, night work isn't like magic hour. It's not like we're going to catch this one at happy hour before we call it quits. It's 2 to 2, right? Or is it 6 to 6?
It's probably going to be, like 6 to 6. You start work at 6 p.m., you wrap at 6 a.m. Or, the week just gets later and later. Like this morning we had a 6:30 a.m. call, and so we're set to wrap like 6:30 p.m. By the end of the week, if we're doing anything at night, or at the split, like day and night, we start later and then you go later. Mm-hmm. So let me tell you, you want some rookie showrunner mistakes?
Sure.
Number 1, promising your best friend you can continue to do the podcast every week. Clearly that may have been an overstatement. 2,
you've been replaced by Claire Saffitz, so it's okay.
That's fine. I support that completely. and wish you the best of luck. 2, a lot of outdoor stuff when it's going to be 100 degrees.
So Andy sent me a picture today of him in the cast of Briar Patch, and I did not know this, but he is taken to dressing like Oliver Stone on the set of Salvador. You know, he just has like a neckerchief and a sun hat, and like just looks like he's in Lost City of Z.
It's called a buff, first of all, and it's necessary because the air here is 85% dust and dirt. So you gotta keep those lungs clear, my guy. But the main takeaway wasn't just that; it's that this poor, beautiful, wonderful cast are wearing their costumes, so they're dying. I didn't send you the picture yet of like the view from behind me in Video Village, which is where we all sit, in a tent watching the monitors, and it's just Rosario and Kim passed out. they both just fully just laid their heads back uncomfortably on director's chairs and just pieced out.
Really?
Because it is real hot. And
is there any like portable air conditioner or like cooling system for outdoors?
Yeah, they're like the locations team is responsible for bringing these like giant Honeywell units, and they sort of pump marginally cool air into the tent. And then we have things like ice cloths to go around our necks, and then PAs are all dressed like they're on Lawrence of Arabia, carrying giant Mary Poppins umbrellas over the heads of the actors as they walk around in the field. It's a lot. But wait, let me hit my greatest hits of showrunner rookie mistakes.
Yeah, keep going.
Stuff outside in the sun. Literally anything at night.
Yeah.
Literally anything at night. Anything at night with children involved. I mean, that's probably a mistake in life.
Have you done children?
Please rephrase the question.
Have you... Oh my God. Have you worked with children on the show?
There are children. Yeah, there are a couple scenes where like there are kids in the background, or there's one featured kid who plays a part across 2 episodes coming up, and at night. Does
that kid watch Euphoria?
We're shooting in an abandoned power plant, so maybe we'll just take Euphoria and double down on it. So driving, no more driving. Process trailers, no fun. This is something that anyone who has ever done anything on a film set would have told me, but I didn't know. Process trailers are where like people are sitting in the actual car doing their scene, like maybe they're driving, but the car is hitched onto a truck and the cameras are pointed at them and the truck is driving.
Yes.
And so we had to shoot all this process trailer stuff the other day, and the choices were sit on a bench, a metal bench backwards hanging over the road, a bench that has been in the direct 90-degree sunlight for the last few hours, and then just drive in a giant circle around a portion of Albuquerque, or follow van, where you are in a van with a monitor rigged to it, following all of that, and then you get into the van, and you're going to be driving around for 40 minutes, and the picture conks out. So I listened to the visceral radio play that is part of Briar Patch episode 4, and I feel like they nailed it, frankly. So we're learning. Yeah. We're learning, and I go around the crew thanking all of them anyway, but I especially thank them for taking a flyer on a rookie showrunner, because they could have seen this coming.
So I feel like my job in your life now is to keep you tethered to pop culture reality. But
yeah, man,
all the news I have for you doesn't seem real. So the first thing, and this has been something that people in the Facebook group and on Twitter have been asking for us to address for a while, is that obviously Jeremy Renner has been like teasing a foray into music, and it was unclear what it was going to be. And my whole thing is this: when you really like hit on a bit, right? And you think you're like, this is really funny that Jeremy Renner, the IED expert in Hurt Locker, the guy who gets dunked on by Tom Cruise for 2 Mission Impossible movies, Hansel and Gretel, Witch Killer, or whatever he was.
Hunter's my guy.
When he does something fun like house flips, you're like, oh, let's make a thing out of this. Like, it's really cool that Jeremy Renner does this. And when he talks about his properties. But I don't really have anything to say about this guy and then doing music. And now it turns out this entire thing was like a co-sponsored thing with Jeep, where he's done like 4 commercials that involve his band calling him Jay. And he's like coming out of restaurants in these commercials, and people are like, hey, want to drive the Jeep? And they toss him the keys and he drives through the desert and then plays his music in these commercials. And it's essentially like pretty bad Maroon 5 stuff, but he is definitely trying to be a real musician, Jeremy Renner. And I want to like share this with you, but I also feel like almost sad about it.
Yeah, I think.
Have you seen the ad?
We all had some fun. Yeah, I think we've all had some fun on day one.
Yeah.
But I think there's a problem here, which is the sincerity factor. Because he really, really, really is buying into this. I think you're right. There is there's just no layer of self-awareness or irony. It doesn't feel charitable because it doesn't feel fun anymore. Is that right? Do you feel that too?
I just feel like it's been a long time since Jeremy Renner has been like the Jeremy Renner from The Town or even Arrival. And so now it's just like, I just feel like we're watching a guy go through some stuff and it's really fine. Like everybody can explore different artistic ways of expressing themselves. But this just isn't like hilarious to me. It's just almost like, hey, just like kind of let him do this and then we'll get him back soon. So there's that. And then, of course, this one, the other piece of cultural news that I have to share with you, which you actually, in truth, shared with me, but I'm going to pretend like you don't know this, is that Noah Baumbach and Greta Gerwig are going to make a Barbie movie with Margot Robbie for Warner Brothers.
I mean, why not, right? I don't know.
I could give you a couple reasons why not.
Well, okay, let's do it from a couple different perspectives. I will do it from the Warner Brothers perspective. How about that? Because, you know, I'm now in a trailer, so
sure.
I really...
you're at an NBC suite, so you're essentially running Warner Brothers.
Here's the thing they say about me. Here's the thing they say about me is that when the push comes to shove, I always side with the big guy. And so every one of these companies has this IP. You and I love to talk about it, right? And they're looking at it, and they're like, well, I guess this is the thing that will get made, and this is the thing that we've been paying on the option for, and we have to make it. So what are we going to do with it? And it appears, you know, increasingly diminished returns, as you and I would argue there ought to be, for projects that solely exist to service the brand name, right? I mean, I think that, I don't even know if we podcasted about it, but like that moment earlier this spring when there was a Sonic the Hedgehog trailer released, and everyone was just literally just, what the fuck?
Yeah.
You know? Like, is this really what we're doing? Also, what's up with his hedgehog crotch? But regardless of that, and the teeth, just horrifying. So if you're going to do something with it, I do think that there is merit in the idea of let's do something surprising or let's do something interesting. Movie stars, you know, appear to be negligible. So Margot Robbie is a popular performer. She's a talented performer. I don't know if she opens a movie. They're banking on however many people are going to see a movie just because it has a recognizable piece of IP in the title. So then the other stuff, why not try to make it better or interesting? If you're only getting X number of people in the door off of the name regardless, why not class it up? I don't know. So makes sense to me.
I recorded a segment with Amanda about Big Little Lies that people will hear in a few minutes. And we talked a lot about the Andrea Arnold controversy that came up on Friday.
Yes, I want to talk about that too.
Yeah. And, you know, I even said to her, I was like, Andy could probably speak to this better than I could about the way in which directors are sort of brought into projects and how they work on TV projects. But for the most part, you know, I just think that when we see someone's name attached to something, we assume we are going to get like a Greenberg Ladybird version of Barbie, and that is likely not what we will get. In fact, I would say it's likely that the chances of this ever actually happening are slim. You know, like, I mean, you get a lot of this person is working on this, and more often than not, it's something like Phoebe Waller-Bridge doing Bond, where it's like, I did some work on it, but I am not directing Bond or whatever. You know, Greta Gerwig has tried to do some mainstream stuff before. She was supposed to essentially write and star in the How I Met Your Mother spinoff, How I Met Your Dad. And she was an Arthur. Like, I mean, she's done bigger stuff before. And I would also say that for as popular and beloved as Noah Baumbach and Greta Gerwig are, their movies are not necessarily like life-changing financial pursuits, I would say, right?
Correct.
And I think that this probably is. I'm sure that the money that they could make working on Barbie, whether it comes to fruition or not, is significantly more than what they make for making the films that they want to be making right now.
I totally agree with that, and I think you cannot discount it. And I think it also, the wording of it was very specific, which is that they're going to write it with an eye towards Gerwig directing it. That means they went in with the best pitch that blew everyone away, and then they looked at each other like two characters in a movie about to hook up, and they're like, are we doing this? And they're like, we're doing this. So they got the green light to do a treatment and maybe write a script eventually. They can walk away at any time, but they're going to get a paycheck for their work on it. And if things are going well and they trust the people they're working with, then maybe she'll direct it. And I do think, neither of us were doing this, but I think in terms of like the groupthink, it's not fair to assume the boundaries of the career she wants to have. She made you and I think a nearly perfect movie in Lady Bird. She leveled up a little bit in terms of ambition and budget with the Little Women adaptation that she made that's coming out later in the year. Who knows what the ceiling is on this? She might want to do big budget movies. She might want to bite at that particular apple. This seems like a pretty good way to start, especially if you have, two of the three pieces necessary for getting a release date and not just being a Netflix thing these days, which are major IP and at least, a name. I still don't know if Margot Robbie sells tickets, but it gets people interested in giving you a budget to make the movie.
Yeah, at this point, honestly, like Margot Robbie's Harley Quinn and $700 million worth of people saw Suicide Squad. So I think she's pretty famous. Do you want to talk a little bit about Andrea Arnold? I have my thoughts. I'll share them with Amanda. So if you wanted to just go off, King.
I just found the whole thing really fascinating. And obviously thinking a lot about things like this because we are making a show where we had a brilliant visionary director and Lily Amirpour direct our pilot. She's shooting a movie right now in New Orleans, and so she couldn't come back to direct the season. Though we both eyed each other longingly across a text message chain. So we have other directors, and I'm going to hopefully get the green light to announce some of them soon because they're awesome, and I'm so excited to be working with them.
Is it Oliver Stone?
It is Oliver Stone. It's so weird. Did Oliver text you too? Rosario has Oliver Stone.
Oliver Stone only uses Signal.
Oliver Stone and Sam Esmail. So it is an ongoing thing, which is, we hired people because we love them personally, we love them artistically, we love them aesthetically, but we also have to be mindful of folding them into the larger whole because this has to look like the same TV show week to week.
Yes.
It was the same thing in a way with the writer's room where I had these brilliant people writing scripts and working with me and defining the story. And this show is them. There is no show without them, and they are equal partners in it. But ultimately, the show also has to sound like it came from one voice. So I'm definitely sympathetic to the plot of the show wanting some consistency. What strikes me as so weird here is that it does sound like everyone was like Andrea Arnold, who is a genius. I love her. I love her movies. I love the way she directs. They were like, we want you to be you, or else why would she sign up to do the second season of something with an established point of view? And then she went in and did the thing she wanted to do. And then there's that moment that you and I have talked about in different contexts that always seems to come up in Hollywood, which is where the people who are actually controlling the money are like, oh, we don't actually want to take chances here.
Yeah.
This is an incredibly, unfathomably expensive project.
But there could be all sorts of reasons for that. I'm not, I talked about this with Amanda, so I don't want to step on my own takes or Amanda's takes. But I think that I was told one thing and it was another thing is a tale as old as Hollywood itself, which is not necessarily make it any better than anything else. But I think what happens is as you see more and more really interesting filmmakers get involved in episodic television, it's going to be a culture clash between the traditional way that people used to make TV, which is like you're saying, not only do we need the show to look the same every week, but just listen to what Andy said in the beginning of this podcast about rookie showrunner mistakes. Think about how hard that is to apply your cinematic vision to, hey, we're going to be in a cemetery for 12 hours, in 99-degree weather. Like maybe we need to take something that happens in this cemetery and move it to an office, or cut it.
Right. Or now, and going back to the cemetery thing, I have to be much more involved than I did on the pilot, not because we have directors who aren't brilliant and capable. They are. It's because they will do their cut and then they will go on to their next job as they should. And I'll be in the edit room with our editors saying, we needed this piece to tell the story that pays off in 4 episodes.
Right.
It's a different situation. I'll say though that
this is why you're going to have in the second episode, Rosario Dawson looks at the camera and says, am I a good man?
There might be some Easter eggs for the old column heads. Just that my favorite piece of information from that expose, or whatever you want to call it, that IndieWire ran, was David E. Kelly's showrunning hours. It says that David E. Kelly, David Boston Public E. Kelly, David Picket Fences E. Kelly, and I want to get the numbers right, so you may have to fact check it for me, but I believe it said that he visited set no more than once a week for an hour at a time, which look at God. That's my only.
He's married to Michelle Pfeiffer too, right?
Yeah, I would also find that more worthy of my attention than my multi-million-dollar successful HBO show. But as someone who, has vague passing memories of my family in California and my friendships, such as with you, I think that's something to aspire to, not criticize.
Absolutely. Okay, Andy, thank you so much for calling in from a desert landscape.
Should I step outside and see if there's... Hold on, let me step outside here and see if there's anybody else. Because it's lunch, so I think nobody's around. I'm just seeing if anybody's hanging around. I'm looking outside. Jesus, this parking lot is hot.
Definitely, I really think we need to have a hybrid watch NFL show where we just roast Jay Ferguson about the Cowboys' upcoming season.
Oh my God, he's ready. I mean, this is the thing. The one good thing about the cemetery scene is that this is the scene where all of our regular cast members are in it. So everybody's here today, plus some other fun people, but they're either in their trailers or at lunch, or maybe they've checked into the embassy suite and they're taking the afternoon off. Hard to say. But next time I call in, I will have a special guest ready to nap with me, and I hold out hope that the watch can go mobile this summer.
Yes, no, I'm holding out hope too. Here. Andy, thanks so much for calling in, man.
Thanks for holding it down, Chris and Kaya, and Baranskis. You guys too. Bye.
I'm now joined by, she's a big name online. She's the biggest organizer of the hashtag release the Andrea Arnold cut on Twitter.
I don't know if I am, but we'll talk about it.
Amanda Dobbins is here, the co-host of Big Little Live, my buddy from The Ringer and from Life. And I wanted to talk to you about Big Little Lies this season, because while you've mostly been talking about the show itself, there's been some off-court issues.
Yes.
That got brought up this week when IndieWire published a piece by Chris O'Falt about how this show is essentially, apparently, reportedly, taken away from Andrea Arnold at a certain point in 2018. It's an interesting piece. It's obviously sourced by people who are probably favorable to Andrea Arnold.
Yes, it seems to be coming from that side of the story.
Yeah, if you had to divide the line, like a line across the country, and you said Andrea Arnold folks on that side, it's probably coming from over there.
Mm-hmm.
And it basically outlines the fact that they brought this cast back. The cast is very expensive. David E. Kelley comes back. Everybody's involved. Jean-Marc Vallée is involved as an EP. And then at a certain point in the shooting, while Andrea Arnold was under the impression that this was going to be her creative vision that she was executing, Jean-Marc Vallée came back in some capacity as a post-production person, and that there were even reshoots later, I believe even into 2019, according to this piece, that either he was on set for or involved with as an EP, and that she was essentially just kind of playing out the string and didn't want to make a big deal about it while it was still shooting. But obviously now it is getting to be a big deal.
Right. And the takeaway is basically that they took the show away from her.
Yeah. What was your initial reaction when you read the piece?
That explains a lot.
Yeah.
And I think we've been talking a little bit about it on Big Little Live, and you talked about it a bit with us this week. Thanks for coming on the show, by the way.
Pleasure.
As our
it was
legal
literally
expert.
My pleasure. It was awesome.
Yeah. That the pacing on this season has been strange.
Mm-hmm.
And there are a lot of high moments and high energy moments in the episode, in an episode, everything to do with Laura Dern. There was a 10-minute disco set piece in one of the episodes. And then there are a lot of really low moments. And, obviously this is a show that deals with serious issues, and it did in season 1. It dealt with sexual assault and abuse and marital abuse and all sorts of tough issues, but that just tonally, it was seesawing a little this season, and that maybe they didn't have as much material as they thought in season 2 because
it feels like a very good collection of memes.
Yes. And we've been does this mystery matter? Does the mystery not matter? Is this show about custody? Is this show about, they're hitting a lot of different buttons, but not always seemingly with a unified vision.
Yeah.
And so it makes a lot of sense that there were a lot of hands in this. And I think also there was a pretty significant outcry, at least on Big Little Lies internet, TV internet, about this piece. And a lot of people's response was yes, that was very obvious based on what I was watching on the screen. And the fact that there are
5 editors credited.
Exactly.
Yes. Yeah.
But that the Andrea Arnold influence as we know it has pretty much disappeared from the things that we're watching on our television.
Yeah.
And that it's kind of gone back to the David E. Kelley, Jean-Marc Vallée approach to the show, albeit with some hiccups because, as we seem to have learned from this piece, they're slicing it up a bit.
Yeah. And so for people who don't know, Andrea Arnold is a filmmaker who made a very great movie called Fish Tank starring Michael Fassbender.
Tremendous and tremendously upsetting movie.
Yes. And then also directed American Honey and was brought in. And I think that the idea was, at least on the surface, is infuse Big Little Lies season 2 with a different energy from the one that Jean-Marc Vallée brought. Now, in the interim, Vallée directed Sharp Objects, and I think has kind of set up a cottage industry for himself of directing high-end, or at least pretentious mysteries, right? Like, try to explore psychological depths while also telling a whodunit. And in all likelihood, apparently, if they had their way, they probably would have just had Vallée do season 2 if they had their druthers, right? Because that's ultimately, they were probably like, he gets the look, he gets he's kind of set up the visual language of the show.
Right.
And yet he was busy shooting Sharp Objects and they didn't want to wait. And if you're dealing with Nicole Kidman, Reese Witherspoon, and Laura Dern's schedules, you get the window you have to go.
Yes. And it's also just kind of, and this is part of the ultimate conflict here, which is just, this is season 2 of a TV show that already exists. And how much reinvention do you want versus how much do you want Reese Witherspoon, Nicole Kidman, Shailene Woodley, Zoe Kravitz, Laura Dern, plus Meryl Streep, plus David E. Kelly's script, finding out what happens. Like, how much is this a second season of a TV show, which we have very different expectations for, versus definitely a film, but also even like serialized TV or auteur television. And it seems like they maybe wanted to have both, and then that didn't really work because those are competing ideas and competing ways of competing ways of making something.
I mean, this is sort of the Big Little Lie of anthology television, is people still want consistency and continuity. They don't want to like relearn how to watch something every time they turn it on.
Yeah, but let's be real. This is an anthology television.
I know, but it's like it certainly isn't working for something like that.
And I think the way that it's been made and the way that it's been positioned and just kind of how we watch TV now and how we expect things is that we are associating it with like, miniseries director-driven TV. But this is a David E. Kelly show and TV is a writer's medium, or it has been, and it has...
It's probably especially if it's a David E. Kelly show.
Exactly. Yeah. And then you've also got 6 brand name actresses who are certainly a priority. So I don't think that the director's vision was ever going to be able to be the solo vision on this.
Yeah. And I think so it's worth noting for typically what the process is for at least the way they're doing things now. And I'm sure I might get Andy on this episode. So if you're listening to this, you will have already talked about it. But, they basically bring in a director for a pilot episode or a series of episodes within the first season. And that director's responsibility is to work with the showrunner, if they are not also the showrunner, to create the visual language of the show that then will be passed down to other directors as they go forward in that season and seasons to come. So someone's working, right now on Andy's show to do that. There are people who would, there's going to be someone who's working on, The Watchmen, Succession. Adam McKay works on the visual language of Succession, directs an episode, and then other people direct the following ones. I think that we, as sort of culture watchers, see a name and we're like, that means that this show is going to be an Andrea Arnold movie. And if I had to guess, I think I said this to you over the weekend, there's a moment in Bad Mother when Shailene Woodley when Jane goes to Corey's house.
Right.
And it's right outside, and it's this really harsh overhead porch light and a handheld shot of her like super close up, and it's really raw and it feels very alive. And I think that's Andrea Arnold. I think that's an example of her being like, let's just use available light. Let's just play with the scene. Let's just have these two characters do the scene and not think about where the blocking is or what the camera's doing. And I'm going to follow them and I'm going to capture it.
Yes, that seems right. And it also, you pointed out that multiple editors are credited on each episode, like far more editors than are normally on a TV show, because it does seem, the inference that you would make from that and from the IndieWire article is that Andrea Arnold shot a lot of things in her visual style, and then some of those were decided to not, they cut around them, right? And so I do think that part of the season and the kind of tonal imbalance that I was talking about is those moments, and then perhaps some other more David E. Kelly-ish moments have been sliced in, and they're trying to put together some competing visions.
Yeah.
You said something where we see a name attached to a show and we're like, oh, it'll probably, this show will be the Andrea Arnold show.
Yeah.
And I do want to say, I don't think we should gloss over it in the IndieWire article that, at least according to that side of the story, it does seem like she had that impression as well.
Sure.
And that then the process didn't go as smoothly and things maybe weren't communicated to her in the way that she wanted them to be brought over. And that's a shame. Like
I'm sure Jeremy Saulnier has the same report about working on True Detective, because he was supposed to direct more episodes than he did initially. There was quote unquote scheduling issues. I very much love True Detective season 3, but the first 2 that he directed are quite atmospheric and evocative and very Saulnier. And then they apparently were like, we need to finish the show. Right. We need to get going. And you can't keep filming puddles.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's common. I mean, Hollywood is littered with stories of studio, these types of processes, a lot of people being in the mix, but it is a shame, or it seems like if you think you're going to get to do it one way and things are taken away, that, I feel for everybody involved in this.
Yes. And it's really interesting to think about these directors that we consider, whether you want to say art house or independent or coming from basically a probably more progressive or braver kind of cinema than the blockbuster mainstream, either TV or movies. And this has happened a few times with Marvel. This has happened a few times with DC. This has happened a few times with these big blockbusters. And then it's happened with Star Wars. Mm-hmm. And now it's happened a few times with TV, where it's somebody goes and they're going to get to direct a bunch. And then it turns out that they actually it's a completely different mechanism. You have to move much faster. You have to get a lot of coverage. You can see a lot of scenes in Big Little Lies that I don't know if they are reshoots or if they were always in the script. A lot of character randomly driving to another character's house to explain something, which feels a lot like this episode doesn't make sense unless Maddie drives to Renata's to talk to her about something, which I guess you could say they aren't texting and stuff like that, which is fine because they don't want their texts to get found in Discovery. And
they did do that a bit in season 1
they would
as
meet
well.
For drinks,
Yeah, and they would be driving and the music would be playing. And
just a lot of showing up at Mary Louise's house. Yes. Or Mary Louise showing up at people's house where it'd be like, would you guys even be talking to her right now? It seems like it would be legally wise to just stay out of her zone right now.
Yes.
Yeah.
I agree. The expositional seams are showing a bit. I will also say it's been interesting to watch people talk about this. The thing to keep in mind, even with all of this sort of filmmaker drama around it, is that this show has always been a soap opera. Mm-hmm. The show is always written by David E. Kelley, based on a novel by Leanne Moriarty, who is a wonderful author and who writes domestic soap operas. Oh, yeah. And it has been interesting to watch people respond to this report and be like, okay, well, that's why I don't like this show as much, because it's gotten really soapy. And this show has always been unbelievably soapy and has had a lot of dramatic leaps of faith.
I wish it was more soapy.
I do too. And so, in a lot of ways, I think this edit seems to be going back to the David E. Kelley kind of over the top stuff.
Yeah, so this is 7 episodes. It could easily be 10 for me.
Yes.
If this had been gone on all summer, I'm sure it's impossible to get that much time of these people. Reese has an Apple show. She has a Hulu show. She has countless other things. All of these actresses and actors are incredibly busy. But I would be fine with this being a 10-episode thing that got more into the silly stuff that happens in Monterey.
Me too. I would have liked to see the full scene at the Esalen Institute when Ed and Madeline are just going at it. I would like to know more of what's happening with Renata and Gordon and their terrible marriage. Mm-hmm. I would like to see more of the dishy mystery stuff.
Yeah.
Quinlan just kind of being not in the show for several episodes. I thought that was a choice about the importance of theme, but maybe that was just kind of what they got.
Yeah.
So I would love for that to be more developed, but that's what I would want more of, not more atmosphere.
Yeah.
And so I think...
Not more shots of waves crashing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And... So I don't know. I don't know what the Arnold
it's interesting. It's 40. I would love to see. We gotta write an algorithm that can do this. Yeah. But I would love to see. It's 44 minutes per show about how much time is spent on Bonnie running or waves crashing.
Which, by the way,
random driving.
Can I just say, the first season, Jane just ran the whole damn time.
I know.
Their character development for one character who had gone through an immense trauma was just her freaking running on a beach. It's the exact same thing. So, I don't actually blame any of these season 2 reported shenanigans.
I thought you guys liked this.
And I think people have a real short memory when it comes to watching people running.
Yeah. Release the running cut.
Yeah, exactly. But I want to say that is that I seem to want like a different thing from the show than a lot of people, which is also to say, I do think it's been a little disjointed, but like I'm having a nice time watching this show.
It's just because like I don't think that we're capable of being like, it's pretty good. It's either like you fucked up. Yeah. You ruined Big Little Lies. It's like they didn't ruin anything. Reese Witherspoon is having a good time. Like she's in a wedding dress.
Well, I'll be honest. I mean, that scene was great. I wanted more of that. I don't think that they have done justice to my queen, Reese. I mean, release the full Esselin episode. That was so weird. Yeah. That was like 10 seconds. Yeah. Come on.
I know.
That's hilarious. Give her more to do because I don't care about Ed. I think that they've done a disservice to the Bonnie character. We've talked a lot about this on the show, which is just like you can't have the only Black female character suddenly have like mystical vibes. Like not a great look. Mm-hmm. I think that they could give Laura Dern a little more room to explore the edges, though I love it when she's screaming.
You don't think she's living on the edge?
I'd like to see where the edge is, actually.
It's blue velvet.
Yeah. But I like, this is the type of TV that I like to watch. Yeah. I think there are
I just wish there was more of it, honestly.
I agree. There are a lot of people who are like, oh, so it's like 6 really famous actresses just having rich people problems on my screen every week in a ridiculous way. Great.
Yeah. It's funny. I was thinking, I was randomly, my wife was really busy yesterday, so I was just kind of like flipping around and I randomly started watching like Friday Night Lights episodes on Hulu yesterday, just like in the background. Mm-hmm. And I was like, TV used to be great.
Yeah.
TV just had like 5 stories and you could just have it on and you'd be like, yeah.
And you wanted to know what happened.
What's up? QB1.
Like, it's great plot.
Yeah.
And so my number one complaint with this season is like, I would like to know what happened.
Yeah.
And maybe we could have some more things happening. And my excitement for Sunday night is like, I would like to know what happens.
Yeah.
And I think I said on our show this week, like, if I don't find out what happens, I'm going to be really mad.
Can't wait.
I know, and it's going to be live. And please tune in Sunday night after the East Coast airing for Big Little Live and me yelling.
Yes.
But it's not, that's why I'll be mad, not because it didn't achieve some perfect balance of, I don't know, interiority and like perfect lighting. Yeah. I don't know, fam. I like TV. Sometimes TV just
I like
needs
TV too. It's a good way to end the pod.
That's where I am.
Okay. Thank you so much, Amanda, for coming by. Big Little Live comes on after the season finale of Big Little. Is the series finale too?
For now, but they said this last time.
I bet you in 2 or 3 years they come back. 2 years.
But we need a new story.
Yeah, absolutely.
They got to end this story right now. I want to be very clear. If there are any editors still employed, you got like 5 days left.
All 5 of you guys. Get back to work.
There we go.
Okay, thanks so much for coming by, Amanda. Today's episode of The Watch is brought to you by Discount Tire. When was the last time you thought about your tires? Tires are what makes the difference in how your car feels and drives. Since 1960, Discount Tire has been keeping customers safe by taking care of all of your tire and wheel needs. With over 1,000 locations across 34 states, their main focus is your safety and the safety of everyone else on the road. Discount Tire provides tire rotations, balancing, free flat repairs, free air checks, and more. And because safety is so important, they provide free tire safety inspections. Discount Tire also has the lowest prices on the best and largest selection of tires and wheels. They'll even make personalized recommendations for you based on your zip code and driving preferences. Whether you need an air check or a set of tires and wheels, Discount Tire can help you get back on the road with peace of mind and change to spare. Visit discounttire.com to shop, research, and purchase your tires today. You can even make an appointment to skip the lines. That's discounttire.com. Discount Tire, they'll get you taken care of. Today's episode of The Watch Pod is brought to you by Luminary. Luminary, a new podcast subscription service with some of the best content around. I am excited about Luminary because it's the only place you can listen to the newest show on the Ringer Network, Break Stuff, the story of Woodstock 1999. This is definitely a podcast you can't miss if you're a Watch fan. In 1999, a music festival took place in upstate New York that became a social experiment. There were riots, looting, and numerous assaults, and it was all set to a soundtrack of the era's most aggressive rock bands. Incredibly, it was the 3rd iteration of Woodstock, a festival known for peace, love, and hippie idealism, but Woodstock 99 revealed some hard truths behind the myths of the 1960s and the danger that nostalgia can engender. Along with Woodstock 99, Luminary gives you access to a bunch of other original shows from innovative, dynamic creators that you can't find anywhere else, like our spinoff, The Rewatchables 99. The Luminary app is free to download, and in addition to the can't-miss originals, you can listen to thousands of podcasts, whether you're into music, TV, and film, comedy, sports, or more. Luminary has the right show for you. Check out Woodstock 99 and so much more only on Luminary. Get your first 2 months of access to Luminary's premium content for free when you sign up at luminary.link/watch. After that, it's only $7.99 a month. That's luminary.link/watch for 2 months of free access. Luminary.link/watch. Cancel anytime. Terms apply. Now I'm joined, making her grand return from the East Coast, where she has been touring the world's great humidity attractions of Washington, D.C., Philadelphia. Where else were you in Washington?
Yeah, I was just in D.C.
Allison,
and New York, but just enough humidity to last me a lifetime.
And you traveled through Philly by train.
Yes, I did specifically text Chris to let him know that I was passing through Philly, as Chris let me know that Claire Saffitz was in the studio. And,
it did seem like I was targeting you a little bit by doing that.
I need to be transparent about my feelings for the listeners. I'm working through this. I think we can get to forgiveness eventually.
Yes.
But I'm a little sore that you did talk to Half Sour.
Half Sour without you. That was a really fun episode on Thursday. I wouldn't have been able to do it if it wasn't for Allison, because Allison brought gourmet makes into my life. So thank you for that. I think that you were the reason why I looked it up in the first place, because you had originally talked about it.
Yes, I think I converted you to the Bon Appetit extended universe.
Yes,
and then
that's right.
Gourmet Makes is yours and many highlights out of that extended universe. But again, I'm very happy that I brought you into the fold. It was a great interview. I'm so looking forward to the Pop Rocks
Thank
episode.
you. Yeah, I know. It was really funny to listen to Claire, because she was like very nervous about like spoiling future Gourmet Makes episodes, like as if Mysterio was going to be like show up in one of them. But it was very fun. Let's talk about Euphoria.
Yeah, let's.
Weirdly, I wouldn't have necessarily called this a couple weeks ago, not because I wasn't interested in the subject matter, but more because I wasn't so like locked in on the execution of Euphoria. This is regular viewing for me. Like every Sunday, I'm happy to turn Euphoria on, despite the fact that it's obviously not like the most uplifting stuff. I wanted to talk to you about how you feel like the show is progressing. It just got announced that it will be coming back for a second season. I think there's only like 2 episodes left, right? Or 3?
I think it's an 8-episode season. So this was the 5th.
Yeah, so we got 3 episodes left. This last one was directed, 03 Bonnie and Clyde. They've all been named after rap songs so far. Made You Look was another one. This last one was directed by Jennifer Morrison. I thought she did a really good job with it. There are plot lines that I care more or less about, but for the most part, it's like a pretty well executed high school soap with like obviously incredibly heavy real world material. And then I wanted to also just talk to you about the execution of it.
Well, weirdly, the fact that it is so uneven, I do think makes it really interesting week to week viewing, where it's like I want to keep checking in to see how the weird balance between all the different elements of the show works out. So just for full disclosure, this was the first episode past the initial screeners that critics saw. So I saw the first 4, and
4 was quite good too, I thought.
Yeah. I definitely thought the screeners got better as they went on, but my initial review was like pretty mixed, because folding the first 4 episodes in with Sam Levinson's debut feature, Assassination Nation, which came out last year, I think there are some shared tendencies that I am a little suspicious of. To be totally honest, I didn't love Assassination Nation, and I saw some of those impulses at work in Euphoria, which I think what Levinson does is that he both wants to sensationalize and maybe leer a little bit at the inner lives of teenage girls, but he also knows enough to know that he should be like sensitive to their interests. So you get, Zendaya saying in voiceover, don't shame girls for sending dick pics, whereas the entire show is this very prurient, like, oh my God, children are just having sex all the time.
Yes. But so is that like, I guess that's really an interesting question about lots of cultural artifacts right now, or cultural production right now, is how much are we inferring that tisk-tiskness? Like, there's not really, the adults in this show, with the exception of Eric Dane's character, who's like off to the side, are like, I think struggling with their kids' behavior, but it doesn't necessarily come as a surprise to them, right?
Yeah, I think the darkness of the show is where I infer the tisk-tiksness. It almost feels engineered to elicit the panicky response that Rob Harvilla dramatized so humorously in his piece about the show. And I think the contrast to something like Skins is Skins kind of shows the kids having fun a little more. And part of that in Euphoria, I think, is to its benefit in the way that it shows that Zendaya isn't just using drugs recreationally. Her character, Rue, like, is an addict who goes to meetings.
Yes.
And it treats that part of her psychology really well. And I will say, part of the reason why I think I'm liking the show more as it goes on, and I really liked Sunday's episode, is that the fact that this is a TV show, I think, encourages the best side or the more interesting side of Levinson's approach, which is just it's a character-based, plot-based media.
Yeah, and I will say that Rue, I mean, we talked about this the first time we talked about this show, but the Rue and Jules relationship, I think, is a really special thing on TV right now. Like, I think just like the chemistry between the performers and where it's going with this, because typically the thing about what Zendaya is doing is that her affect is perfectly matched with her character's interior life. So you can kind of see that this is a person who has, like, sanded down all her nerve endings, and it's really hard for her to feel anything. And that's, I think, in some ways across the board with the kids in the show, is that you're not really sure what's in there anymore because of how maybe they've been hollowed out by what they see on their screens or like what the world is telling them. But there's this really interesting dynamic at play that especially gets played up towards the end of this 5th episode about the trade-off of addiction and how she is basically saying, like, I will stay clean if I have this person. That's the trade. Like, I will do it because Jules is essentially replacing what drugs gave me. And then that tightrope and how Jules feels about being replaced, like being the replacement there. And that tightrope that Rue is going to walk. I thought it was like a really perceptive, accurate, and sensitive portrayal of, like, addiction in a way that you usually don't see on TV.
Yeah, and I do think one of the things I appreciated about this past episode is the show's starting to do a really good job of both keeping you in Rue's point of view and making her just an incredibly compelling, charismatic lead, which is due in large part to Zendaya's performance. But also in this episode, you can really see, like, what Rue is doing that is unhealthy and complicated, and conveying, you know, that final shot of Jules realizing that she just has an incredibly unfair weight being put on her as, like, a caretaker to her friend, which is just not something anybody should be wholly responsible for, let alone a teenage girl with her own set of issues and problems. Sure. And I really like that it shows you, like, what Rue is doing wrong while also just rooting you in her perspective. And I want to say, like, one of the things I like about the show is the way they're able to do that across the cast. Like, even in the screeners, which I had, like, a slightly more mixed reaction to than this past episode, I've always loved this cold open approach they have, where it's like every episode,
long monologue from Rue
about a different character, and just telling you how, you know, this past episode, it was about Maddie, who's this former child pageant who's kind of, I don't think she's explicitly a cheerleader, although you do see her dancing, but she's the kind of, like, popular girl who's the girlfriend of the jock and could definitely very easily be marginalized. And Rue explains her thought process, explains her background. But at the same time, these kids are being stupid. They're acting in very dumb ways that are very realistic for a teenager. But you're also led to get them a little more. And I think the farther the show goes, the more it leans into the treating these people as humans with, you know, serious problems and conflicting influences, and the less it gives into the more sensationalistic, you know, being provocative for provocativeness' sake that I balked at in the earlier episodes.
Yeah, I don't find the show very provocative, honestly. Like, I think it wants to be, but, like, I think Kat's plotline, for instance, should be provocative. But when she hooks up with the guy at the mall, you know, and it finally is consummated, I think, you know, towards the last 15 minutes of the episode, I'm kind of like, given what else we've seen over the course of this episode, this is not, like, hammering home whatever I think that they want. Maybe they're not trying to hammer home anything at all. Maybe it's just like, this is what she wants to be doing. And she's like herself now and not just identifying herself through being friends with Maddie or whatever.
Well, with that plot line, I thought the camming thing was way too over the top and is weirdly almost unnecessary now that it gets into just her having sex with random guys. And I do think it hits on like a very real tendency that like less conventionally attractive teen girls have, which is like we're taught that sex is validation. And she's in that phase where she realizes like, oh, guys are attracted to me and I feel like I should pursue and indulge that because like that's what makes me feel desired and seen. And that's just like a totally like, I have seen that happen to friends. I identify with that thought process she's going to. And it's like, now that she's doing that with actual people in her life, I don't really think the like totally excessive camming plotline, which feels like I don't even know, like an episode of Undressed or something.
That one feels like a little bit like a whiteboard dump. Like let's put a character at the top and let's like list 15 things that she could be into. Like One Direction fanfic, but Tumblr, but this, but camming. And it's like, on one hand, they're trying to plot like, see, this is the trajectory that like if somebody gets started in this subculture, they could just keep going deeper and deeper into this. But on the other hand, I felt like it was really more of like a list of like bullet points about the dangers of being online too much that got shoved into one character.
And it's not really needed anymore now that I feel like the character is expressing that same conflict in a much more grounded way. Also, the One Direction thing I thought was funny in that it's one of those examples of the show. I think the show is almost like least effective as a Gen Z explainer just because One Direction fanfic on Tumblr was my generation of teens. That was like, you know, a half decade plus ago.
It's kind of like, has Sam Levinson been working on this for a while and like has taken some stuff from maybe another generation and put it in this?
Yes. And speaking of like, I generally really liked the Maddie plotline that we got in last night's episode. That person would not idolize Sharon Stone's character in Martin Scorsese's 3-hour film
I didn't.
Casino.
So that was a good question. I was wondering if Casino had like a Netflix run and that's why maybe it got discovered. Like I didn't know, but like that is certainly not like, I don't know how you come across that character. That is not a movie that gets like battered around a lot.
I think it's on Netflix recently. I just don't think like that person would be watching Netflix.
Right.
This is not someone who has been shown to have like any other interest in like classic cinema. She could just list a character from like Love and Hip Hop or Real Housewives and it would occupy the same like I think space in pop culture, but it would just make more sense. Or like in an earlier episode, Rue's little sister, who's played by Storm Reed, mentions that she's watching My So-Called Life.
Yeah.
And it's like, I don't really think today's teens know
I don't
who
know.
Angela Chase
I don't
is.
know. Yeah. I mean, you can tell me anything now that like, you know, Friends had that kind of run that it did. Let's talk a little bit about the execution because I think that I've been kind of like workshopping this a little bit and I was thinking about writing something about it, but there's one thing I wanted to talk to you about, which is basically how packed to the gills this is with music, which I think gives it a buoyancy that it may not always have because it's so morbid and it's so dark, and even it's the lighting, the staging, like everything kind of looks borderline Riverdale, you know, and really atmospheric. So like when they walk Tyler and his dad through the cafeteria or whatever that's supposed to be, it's like Rue and Jules are just sitting at a table in basically an unoccupied basketball gym. Like it doesn't make any sense as to why there's only 2 tables in this giant space other than it looks cool.
Yeah.
And so they've already got like a kind of heightened reality, a very stylized reality going. And then on top of that, I don't know what changed about music supervision or like what it costs to place things in shows. It was like a really big deal 20 years ago if you could get a certain song, like if there was like a song in a Scorsese movie, it was like, oh my God, they got a Rolling Stones song. And now it's just like every second of available footage just crammed with some song. And I like the music in Euphoria, like as music. It's just that I wonder how Euphoria would play as just like straight footage. Like I'm curious whether or not it would be unwatchable sometimes.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I think this is that Drake EP credit doing its work.
Yeah.
I think they really needed to, I'm sure that was paid for handsomely and they need to get the most bang for their buck out of having him as a collaborator.
Yes.
But yeah, I agree. It definitely fits with the whole like almost music video-ish. Like there's a whole interlude in Assassination Nation that's just like a cheerleader played by Bella Thorne like twerking in slow motion to a rap song and it plays like zero function in the plot and is literally just like, this looks cool. I do think as the series goes on, it is a little more of a counterbalance and a little less just like doing wheelies. But yeah, like I notice all the time just the way they make this really banal suburb. Like there's absolutely a way they could have shot and lit this that would just be like fluorescent lighting everywhere. Everything's kind of bleached of color in a way that kind of like matches the way Rue experiences the world.
But it's way more like Spring Breakers. Yeah.
Exactly. Or Riverdale or whatever. Like that scene where her, Jules, and Maude Apatow's character Lexi are just like getting on their bikes outside the roller rink, and the roller rink for whatever reason has these like multi-tonal neon lights on just like the patio. And I was just like, okay, it is honestly like a huge part of the appeal of the show is it's just cool to look at.
Yeah, it's cool to look at. It's cool to listen to. There's some really good performances. I think we're being obviously set up for like Rue relapse because Jules can't handle it. But what do you think the legs are for this show? Because it feels so like, honestly, like frenzied when you're watching it that it's hard to understand what the sustainability and like long tail of this show would be. And also, I would have to say that typically what happens in a second season of anything, especially a show that's set in high school or has like an ensemble like this, is they just like add characters. And I would have to say that I'm already kind of like not really I know that next week is probably about McKay and Cassie, but I'm just kind of like, I'm not even sure who all these people are sometimes. So do you think that it's a show that should get like larger in its ensemble? And what do you think it can be as it goes forward?
I would not be surprised if the season ended with some huge, like, shark jumping, crazy confrontation. Although I will say I was pleasantly surprised in the developments in last night's episode where this choking incident that happened at the county fair in episode 4 results in a guy like getting charges and people immediately being like, yeah, this is abuse, this is violent, which is, I think, kind of a pleasant surprise to see like that kind of character experiencing real consequences.
Very far from the River's Edge ethos of a kid who tells on another kid is a dead kid, because like everybody in there was just like, yo, I don't know if this is relevant to your investigation, but here's all this other gossip that's going on. Outside just telling the principal everything.
Just immediate stitching, or the way it just immediately becomes common knowledge that this kid is like struggling with his sexuality.
Yeah,
and it's
exactly.
not even like, oh, like he's lost his popularity, he's nothing. Everyone's just like, oh yeah, like that's an interesting thing that'll like occupy my group chat for a second.
Sure.
But the fact that that plot went in a surprising direction just makes me curious on a raw, like, I don't really know what's going to happen next level. I also do think it's smart that they keep the action pretty, like, an 8 episodes feels like the right length.
Yes.
Like, and also I've been surprised, like, we're more than halfway through and not a huge amount has necessarily happened. I like this show a lot as just a character base. Let's figure out the interior lives. And I'm curious in the trajectory of the action, but like that's where it's best. And I almost feel like I agree with you in that I would almost rather they bear down a little deeper on, you know, there's tons about Jules and her family situation and what's going to happen when she tries to, you know, navigate the whole I've outgrown the small town thing that I would just like to see without the additional crowding.
So they're juniors?
I don't know if they've established that yet.
Because Zendaya Rue says something about following Jules to New York and following her wherever she's going to go. So I was trying to remember, like, oh, is this, I bet it's like the weird, like, is Tim Riggins a sophomore for 3 years so that he can still be on Friday Night Lights?
I think they might also just like walk it back where it's like, just kidding. Yeah. That was 10th grade.
Yeah. Let's wrap up by talking about Zendaya because I haven't actually seen Spider-Man yet because I've just been trapped in front of my computer waiting for people to get traded in the NBA. But it's a really cool star-making performance to the extent that she needed to be made a star anymore because it's not flashy. Because it's so like wise beyond her years and flat, and it's not like Disneyfied at all. It's not like Stage Kid at all. It's very, very, very within itself. Can you talk to me a little bit about how you're feeling about that performance?
Totally. I mean, well, first of all, Lindsay Zolaz wrote a great piece for The Ringer about Zendaya's rise as a celebrity and the way she's kind of mastered this like cool kid deadpan, both in Spider-Man and in Euphoria. Yeah.
So to some extent, it's an extension of that. Yeah.
Yeah. And one thing I really like about the sort of casting and characterization on this show is it avoids that problem where it's like, here's someone who is obviously insanely charismatic in that she was cast to anchor a TV show, but we're going to depict her as like a loser or someone who's widely disliked or a social outcast or something. And I think both her and Jules, played by Hunter Schafer, are really shrewdly outlined as like, you can see why they don't really fit in, but no one is like, oh, like those weirdos. It's just like they kind of stick to themselves. They're, you know, they fit into the social landscape. You can see how they're a little segregated, but also like they can navigate things in a way that's not like, let's pretend these insanely compelling people, like just no one else notices that about them, which is something I really like about Euphoria in general, is that except for, you know, this Jacob Elordi's character, there aren't really villains. It's just everyone kind of figuring out their own shit.
Yeah, and I think that it's doing an interesting thing where we're probably like, it's terrifying for adults and maybe it's passé for teens. I have no idea. Like, I mean, or maybe it's passé for people in their 20s who are like, well, that wasn't quite what it was like, by the way, you know, or whatever. But every once in a while, you probably hit a generation that's particularly susceptible to new and or intense amounts of drugs. Like, I mean, like, you know, whether it's like when ecstasy hit or when, you know, you had the 60s with psychedelics, in the 80s with cocaine. And I think that there probably is like an unremarked upon amount of like mind-altering substances going around that are in tandem with the state of the world, being online all the time, living your life as through these like avatars of experience, are probably doing a lot to change like what I grew up, like my idea of what like normal high school experience is. And also like normal conventions of sexuality and like identity, you know? And I think that that's worth noting, that like the show seems pretty non-judgmental about all of it and not even using it to be like, you should be scared because your kids are doing so many drugs. I'm sure that I mean, like you see somebody like Rue and you see somebody who's like in danger of really falling into a hole. But for the most part, it seems to just be kind of like, this is like a mode, but it's not necessarily a sin.
Yeah, I think the show is best when it does that.
Yeah.
I do think it can't really resist sometimes being like, your kids are showing themselves for strangers on the internet and blah, blah, blah. And I think the more it goes into just...
Well, it wants to have it both ways. It wants to have like the shocking thing and then the voiceover that's like, this isn't that big of a deal.
Exactly. Yeah. I think that's totally true. And I think one of the reasons why Zendaya is so great is that both her character feels very specific and you see how her addiction and her drug use is born out of her specific life history and disposition. And it's not just like kids everywhere are doing fentanyl.
Right.
It's like this person feels the need to try these substances because they've been made to feel this way by like the passing of her father and her weird relationship with her mother and her just... natural.
And the existential experience of like being a suburban American. You know what I mean? And just kind of
in
like
the shadow of 9/11.
No, I know. Oh, God. All right, Allison, thank you so much for stopping by to talk about Euphoria. We'll definitely have you back on. Maybe for the finale. I'm sure you'll be back on before then. But to talk about the end of the season and what we thought.
Sure.